Their message said, "Delete this or you're fired." For a second, I just stared at my phone like it had grown teeth. It was 9:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the glow from the screen made the coffee on my desk look darker than it was. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I could hear the air conditioner kick on with that dry rattle it always had, and somewhere behind me, the printer on the shared table started its usual morning tantrum. I said nothing. And that became his biggest mistake. I'm an accounts analyst at a mid-sized logistics company in Austin, Texas. On paper, my job is boring. Vendor reconciliation, invoice approvals, month-end close support, and the occasional, "Can you pull me a report?" like, right now. That arrives 5 minutes before a meeting I wasn't invited to. But in practice, my job is where the truth lives. Numbers don't care who's yelling. Spreadsheets don't flinch when someone's trying to bully them into being quiet. My boss was the kind of manager who believed volume was leadership. His name was Darren Holt. 40-something, always perfectly pressed, always wearing a belt that looked like it cost more than my rent. And he loved saying things like, "I'm the one who signs your reviews," as if it was a prayer, and he was the only God in the building. When I started at Brightline Freight Solutions, yes, the name sounded like a company that would have inspirational posters in the break room, Darren was already a legend. Not a good one. More like the ghost story HR pretended didn't exist. He didn't ask for things. He demanded them. He didn't coach. He threatened. And he had this habit of leaning in too close when he talked, like he wanted you to smell the confidence on him. The office was open plan, all gray carpet and glass conference rooms, with names like Catalyst and Summit. The kitchen had a dented stainless steel fridge that hummed loud enough to be considered a personality. Someone had taped a handwritten note to the microwave. "Please cover your food." Someone else had written underneath it, "And your mouths." I worked on the finance side, tucked into a row of desks near the windows. I had a cheap little desk fan, a blue ceramic mug with a chipped rim, and a stress ball shaped like a lemon that I squeezed when Darren walked past. By early May 2025, I had learned the rhythm of his moods. Mondays were for panic. Tuesdays were for blame. Fridays were for pretending nothing had happened. The red flags weren't subtle. They were neon. Darren asked me to fix numbers after a report was already sent. Darren forwarded vendor emails to me and wrote, "Handle it," like the entire relationship wasn't his responsibility. Darren loved private conversations and hated anything in writing. Darren would call me at 7:03 a.m. on a Saturday and act offended if I didn't answer. Darren had a way of making small mistakes feel like crimes, and his mistakes feel like weather. Unfortunate, unpreventable, nobody's fault. And Darren had a weird obsession with one vendor, a consulting firm called Cedar Ridge Advisory. Cedar Ridge was supposed to help with process optimization. That was the official phrase. In reality, it meant someone sent us slide decks filled with stock photos of diverse people high-fiving and told us to align stakeholders. Their invoices were always a little too round. $9,500, $12,000, $15,000. Always just under thresholds that would trigger extra approval steps. Always. Like someone had built a staircase out of loopholes and was jogging up it. The thing Darren wanted me to delete wasn't one file. It was a thread. An email chain that had been forwarded around internally, by accident, I think, where Cedar Ridge's account manager mentioned a referral arrangement and thanked Darren for making it easy. It was the kind of wording that made my stomach do that slow drop, like an elevator going down one floor too many. The thread was attached to an invoice spreadsheet I maintained for vendor tracking. I kept it clean and boring. Date received, invoice number, amount, GL code, approval status, payment date, nothing dramatic. But that spreadsheet was linked to everything. Every invoice, every payment request, every approval trail. And in that email chain, there it was. A casual line about the percentage we discussed, followed by a separate email from Darren saying, "We'll keep it clean. Send it the usual way." The usual way. I read it twice, then a third time, like maybe my eyes were lying. My fingertips went cold. I remember looking down at my desk and noticing the tiny scratch on my stapler, the one shaped like a lightning bolt. The world turned into details because the big picture was too heavy. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to be paranoid, but I also wasn't stupid. I did what I always did when something felt off. I documented. I saved the email chain as a PDF and dropped it into a secure folder on our company drive, the one with restricted permissions. Then I took a screenshot of Darren's reply in the thread, because I'd learned the hard way that people who fear paper trails love to pretend they never existed. I didn't tell anyone yet. I didn't know how. I was new enough to still feel like the "don't rock the boat" rule applied to my whole career. Then Darren noticed. He didn't come over to my desk at first. He didn't send a polite email. He went straight to my phone, like we were in some kind of toxic relationship, where he thought he owned my attention. At 9:12 a.m., the text arrived. Their message said, "Delete this or you're fired." My throat tightened so fast it felt like someone had pulled a drawstring. I looked up and saw Darren through the glass wall of his office. He was standing, phone in hand, staring directly at me like he could see through my skull. I could have replied. I could have tried to smooth it over. I could have said, "What do you mean?" Or, "I'm not sure what you're referring to." But I knew what he meant, and he knew I knew. I did the one thing he couldn't control. I didn't respond. The silence was weird, not peaceful. More like the kind of silence that happens when a room realizes someone just said something unforgivable, but nobody wants to be the first to react. I kept my face neutral. I clicked into my reconciliation worksheet, like my whole world wasn't tilting. 10 minutes later, my desk phone rang. It was the old black kind with a curly cord, like the office was cosplaying as 2006. I picked up. "Hey, Darren." His voice was too calm. That calm that's actually rage wearing a suit. "Come to my office. Now." I stood up and walked across the carpet like my legs didn't belong to me. I could feel eyes on me from my coworkers, but everyone pretended not to look. Open offices train people to mind their business. Darren's office smelled like citrus cologne and printer toner. On his desk was a perfectly aligned stack of papers and a silver pen that he never actually used. He waved me in and shut the door behind me. He didn't offer me a seat. He never did. That was his thing. Stand people up so they feel smaller. He held up his phone. "You saw my text." "I did," I said, keeping my voice even. "Then why haven't you done it?" He tapped the screen, the way someone taps a stubborn vending machine. My heart was loud. I could feel it in my ears. "I'm working." He leaned forward. "No, you're not. You're sitting out there pretending you have a job while you're actually holding on to something that could damage this company." I blinked once. "What exactly do you want me to delete?" His jaw clenched. For a fraction of a second, his eyes flicked toward his computer monitor, as if it had the answer he couldn't say out loud. "You know," he said, "the thread, the vendor email, the one you saved." So he was watching? He knew I saved it. Which meant he'd been in my folders, or he'd been checking access logs, or he'd had someone else do it. That thought made my skin crawl. "I don't delete company records," I said carefully. He laughed, but it wasn't humor. "Don't get righteous with me. You're not a hero. You're an employee, and I'm telling you to delete it." I held his gaze. "I can't." His voice rose. "You can. You just won't. And if you don't, I will make sure you regret it." There it was. Not subtle, not professional, just pure threat. I swallowed and kept my hands still at my sides. I didn't want him to see them tremble. "If you have concerns about the email, we can bring it to legal or compliance." The air in the room changed. Like I'd lit a match, and he suddenly realized the room was full of gasoline. He stared at me for a long, hard second. Then he said, slower, sharper, "You're going to delete it today." I walked out without promising anything. Back at my desk, I sat down, exhaled, and stared at my monitor. My inbox was full of normal work. A vendor asking when they'd be paid. A coworker requesting a GL code. The CFO's assistant asking for a report by end of day. My body wanted to panic. My brain wanted to freeze. But another part of me, the part that had been trained by too many late nights, fixing other people's messes, clicked into a cold, practical mode. If Darren was threatening me this openly, he was already cornered, and cornered people do reckless things. I opened the PDF I'd saved and checked the file properties. Created at 8:41 a.m., modified at 8:43 a.m., still intact, still there. Then I did something small that felt like a lifeline. I took a photo of my phone screen showing Darren's message with my computer clock visible in the background. It was a dumb little detail, but it mattered. Time mattered. I also forwarded the email chain to my personal notes in our company-approved secure note system, the one compliance recommended for documenting incidents. I didn't send it outside the company. I didn't break policy. I just made sure it existed in more than one place. Then I went back to acting normal. I answered emails. I updated invoices. I laughed politely when my coworker Maya told me about her dog eating an entire stick of butter off the counter like it was a trophy. But inside, I was counting seconds. At 11:26 a.m., Darren sent another text. Their message said, "I'm not playing. Delete it before lunch." That one made my stomach twist, not because it was scarier, but because it was so childish. Like he thought intimidation was a substitute for authority. I didn't reply to that one either. I took another screenshot. At 12:04 p.m., Darren appeared at my desk. He didn't say my name. He just stood there until I looked up. His smile was tight. "Have you taken care of it?" I looked at him and kept my expression blank. "I'm in the middle of a reconciliation." His eyes narrowed. "This isn't a request." "I understand," I said. It was an awkward silence, thick enough to chew. Maya's keyboard clacked behind me. Someone in the kitchen laughed too loudly at something. My desk fan whirred. Darren leaned closer, voice low. "If you make me look stupid, I will bury you." Then he walked away, like he'd just delivered a motivational speech. I sat there for a full 10 seconds without moving. My mouse cursor blinked at me like it was waiting for instructions. And then, because the universe has timing, My calendar reminder popped up. It's security audit. Backup verification window. 1 WAL PM. 3 MOS PM. I'd seen those before. Routine. Quarterly. Everyone ignored them unless their laptop started acting weird. I stared at the reminder like it was a trap door opening. Brightline had a retention policy. Most companies do. Emails, shared drive files, even Teams messages. They were backed up. Not forever, but long enough that deletion wasn't a magic wand. Darren either didn't know that, or he thought he was special enough to override it. At 1:07 p.m., my Teams pinged. It was from Jordan in ITIS, the guy with the quiet voice and the habit of wearing hoodies under his blazer, like he was constantly ready to escape. "Hey, quick question," Jordan wrote. "Did you delete or move a file in vendor reports this morning?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could feel my pulse in my wrists. I typed, "No, I saved a PDF of an email chain, but I didn't delete anything." A minute later, "Got it. We're seeing some weird activity. Can I call you?" I said yes. Jordan called at 1:10 p.m. "Hey, so, we have an alert on abnormal access patterns in the finance share. It flagged a file that was created, and then someone tried to delete it." My mouth went dry. "Someone tried to delete it?" "Yeah," he said. "It didn't fully go through because of permissions, but we're seeing attempts. We're pulling backup snapshots anyway, because it's part of the audit." I looked through the glass toward Darren's office. Darren was on his phone, pacing. His movements were sharp, like he was cutting the air. "I didn't delete it," I repeated, and I made sure my voice sounded steady. "I believe you," Jordan said, and the fact that he said it so quickly made me realize how often people didn't. "We also have device logs. It's just, I need to ask, has anyone been pressuring you about that file?" There was a tiny pause. The kind where you decide if you're about to change your life. "Yes," I said. "My manager has been telling me to delete it." Jordan exhaled. "Okay, that's what I needed. Don't touch anything else. Don't move files. Just keep doing your work. I'm going to loop in my director in HR because this is now a compliance issue." My hands were cold again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. Because now it wasn't just me against Darren's ego. Now it was Darren against a system built to remember. At 1:42 p.m., I got an email from IT Security Operations with a generic subject line, "User Activity Review." It asked me to confirm whether I had initiated any deletion requests in the vendor reports folder between 8:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. I replied, no. I attached nothing yet. I didn't volunteer the text messages. I didn't need to, not at that moment. I just answered the question. At 2:15 p.m., Darren stormed out of his office and headed straight for the IT area. Our IT team sat in a corner behind a half wall, like the company wanted their magic, but didn't want to admit it needed them. I couldn't hear what he said, but I could see him, his hands chopping the air. Jordan sitting stiff, eyes fixed on his monitor. A few minutes later, Jordan messaged me again. "Do you have any written instruction from your manager about deleting the file?" I stared at the message, then at my phone. My screenshot gallery was suddenly the most valuable thing I owned. "Yes," I typed. 2 texts. "Please forward screenshots to me in HR," he wrote. "Use the secure upload link I'm sending." He sent a link. My heart thudded. My fingers moved carefully, like the screenshots were glass. I uploaded both, the 9:12 a.m. and the 11:26 a.m. messages. The moment I hit submit, I felt something shift inside me, like I'd stepped across a line and there was no going back. At 2:48 p.m., Darren came back to his office. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He shut his door hard enough that the glass rattled. At 3:03 p.m., HR sent me a calendar invite. Meeting, confidential. Scheduled for 4:15 p.m. in Summit, the glass room with the annoying wobble in one chair leg. I stared at the invite for a second, then accepted. At 4:15 p.m., I walked into Summit carrying my notebook and my chipped blue mug, like I needed a shield. Inside were three people. Jordan from IT, a woman from HR named Elise, and a man I recognized as outside counsel, because he had that legal pad posture and a tie that looked too expensive for our office. Elise gestured to a chair. "Thanks for coming on short notice." I sat. The chair wobbled exactly like I expected. I pressed my knee against it to steady it, because if the chair betrayed me too, I might have lost it. Jordan looked tired. Elise looked serious in a way that made my skin tighten. The lawyer introduced himself. "I'm Mark. I'm here to help the company understand what happened and what our obligations are." Elise folded her hands. "We're conducting a review of document access and vendor invoicing. We need your cooperation." "I'm happy to help," I said, and I meant it. Jordan opened his laptop and turned it slightly so I could see. On the screen was a timeline, a list of events with timestamps. "Here's what we have," Jordan said. At 8:41 a.m., a PDF was created in the vendor reports folder under your user account. At 8:52 a.m., another user account accessed that same folder from a device not assigned to you. At 9:03 a.m., there was an attempt to delete the PDF. At 9:05 a.m., there was a second attempt. Both were blocked due to permissions. My stomach turned. "Another user account?" Jordan nodded. "Darren Holtz." Elise watched my face carefully, like she was measuring whether I would collapse or explode. I didn't do either. I just sat there, breathing, trying not to let my anger make me stupid. Mark, the lawyer, leaned forward. "You said Darren instructed you to delete the file. We have screenshots of those messages." I nodded. "Yes." Elise asked, "Did you comply?" "No," I said. "I didn't delete anything." "Why not?" she asked, and her voice wasn't accusing. It was careful, because this is the part where you decide if you're a team player or a person. "I didn't feel comfortable deleting company records," I said, and the email chain looked like it related to vendor payments. If there was a problem, I believed it should go through compliance. Jordan clicked to another screen. "We pulled backup snapshots as part of the audit. Even if the file had been deleted, we would have restored it. We also pulled the email thread directly from the mail archive, so we have it." I felt a strange, quiet satisfaction. Not gloating, just gravity returning to its proper place. Elise slid a printed sheet across the table. It was a summary of Cedar Ridge invoices, dates, amounts, approvals. The amounts were exactly what I'd noticed, always under the threshold. $9,500, $9,800, $9,750. Mark tapped one line with his pen. "These are structured to avoid additional approvals." Elise looked at me. "Have you noticed any pressure to approve these quickly?" I swallowed. "Yes. Darren would mark them urgent and tell me to push them through before end of day." Jordan added, "And we can see the approvals are consistently coming from Darren's account within minutes of invoice receipt, sometimes before the supporting documents were uploaded." Elise's face tightened. "Okay." Mark asked, "Do you have any other documentation? Emails, notes, anything that indicates Darren knew these invoices were questionable?" I opened my notebook. My hands didn't shake now. I saved the email chain as a PDF. I also took a photo of the text message with the time visible. I can share that if needed. Elise nodded. Please do. I emailed the photo to Elise and Jordan right there in the meeting. Then Elise said, "We need to ask you something directly. Has Darren retaliated against you previously? Threats, intimidation, anything like that?" I hesitated because naming it makes it real. But the texts had already made it real. "Yes," I said. "He's threatened my job before when I questioned corrections to reports." Jordan's eyes flicked up. "That tracks." Mark's expression didn't change, but his pen moved faster. Elise took a breath. "Thank you. We're going to speak with Darren immediately after this." My throat tightened again. Not from fear, from the reality that my life at work was about to get ugly before it got better. I left the meeting and went back to my desk. The office felt different, like everyone could smell something burning, but nobody knew where the fire was. At 4:58 p.m., Darren was called into Catalyst, one of the larger conference rooms. I didn't see who called him, but I saw him stand up abruptly and head down the hall with that stiff posture he used when he wanted to look unbothered. He was in there for a long time. I kept working. I didn't want anyone to say I was distracted. I reconciled 3 vendor statements, found a duplicate payment request for $3,200, and flagged it. My brain clung to normal tasks like a life raft. At 6:11 p.m., I went to the kitchen to refill my water bottle. My bottle had stickers on it. One said, "Ask me about my spreadsheet," which I thought was funny until I realized it was now painfully accurate. Maya was in there too, poking at the vending machine because it had eaten her dollar. She looked at me. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to smile. "Just a long day." She leaned in, whispering like the fridge could hear. "Darren's been pacing like he's trying to wear a hole in the floor." I nodded and unscrewed my bottle cap. My hands slipped because they were slightly sweaty, and the cap flew out of my fingers and clattered onto the tile. It rolled right under the vending machine. Maya stared at me. I stared at the cap. For a second, we both just stood there, and then Maya snorted. "Of course," she said. "Of course the cap rolls into the darkest corner, like it's hiding from Darren, too." I crouched down, my forehead nearly touching the cold metal, and fished it out with my fingertips. My cheeks were hot with embarrassment, but the tiny moment of stupidity actually helped. It reminded me I was still human, not just a target. When I stood up, Maya's expression softened. "Seriously, if he's on your case again, you can tell me." I wanted to tell her everything, but I didn't. Not yet. At 6:47 p.m., Darren came out of Catalyst. His face was pale under the fluorescent lights. He walked past my desk without looking at me, but I could feel his anger like heat. At 7:05 p.m., Jordan messaged me. We restored the file from backup and confirmed the email archive. "HR and legal are escalating. You're protected here." I read that 3 times. Protected. At 7:32 p.m., Elise emailed me. "Please do not discuss this matter with coworkers while the investigation is ongoing." Fair. Also terrifying, because silence is where rumors breed. The next morning, Wednesday, May 14th, I arrived at 8:18 a.m. The office smelled like burnt coffee and someone's citrus hand sanitizer. My desk fan was still pointed at my chair like it had been waiting all night. Darren wasn't there. At 9:02 a.m., the CFO, Priya Suresh, sent an all-finance email requesting everyone be available for a brief compliance review. Priya was sharp and calm and had the kind of authority that didn't need theatrics. When Priya asked for something, people did it. At 10:20 a.m., I was called into another meeting, this time with Priya, Elise, Jordan, and Mark. Priya looked at me with steady eyes. "I understand you received a message from Darren, instructing you to delete a record." "Yes," I said. Priya nodded once, like she'd already accepted the reality, and moved on to solutions. "You did the right thing by not complying." That should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the floor was still unstable under me. Jordan brought up the logs again. This time, the timeline was bigger. More events, more dates, not just my file. "We expanded the scope," Jordan said. "We found multiple instances of structured invoice approvals from Cedar Ridge. We found email correspondence referencing a referral arrangement. We found a pattern of Darren accessing restricted folders outside normal business hours, including from an unassigned device." Priya's mouth tightened. "How much are we talking?" Mark answered, flipping through his notes. "Over the last 9 months, Cedar Ridge invoices total $186,000. Several appear unsupported or duplicate in nature. We're investigating whether there's personal benefit involved." My stomach dipped. I knew it was bad, but hearing the number out loud made it real in a new way. Elise asked me, "Did Darren ever ask you to change an invoice code or split an invoice to keep it under approval thresholds?" "Yes," I admitted. "He told me once to break it up because procurement gets annoying." I didn't do it. I said I needed a new invoice from the vendor, if amounts changed. Priya's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did he push back?" "He got angry," I said. "He told me I was being difficult." Mark looked at me. "Do you feel Darren's behavior toward you escalated when you refused?" "Yes." Priya leaned back in her chair. "Okay." There was another awkward silence. Not uncomfortable because of tension between us. Uncomfortable because we were all staring at the size of the mess Darren had made. Then Priya said, "I want to be clear. You are not in trouble for any of this. If anything, you may have prevented further damage." The relief that hit me was so sharp I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just nodded and felt my eyes sting. Jordan closed his laptop. "We're also tightening access controls immediately. Vendor reports will have restricted write permissions. Backups remain intact, but we're adding additional alerts for deletion attempts and off-hours access." Elise added, "HR is issuing a non-retaliation notice to all parties involved. Darren is currently on administrative leave pending investigation." Administrative leave. That phrase is a polite way of saying, "Sit down and don't touch anything while we count the bodies." Priya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and then looked up. "He's here." My chest tightened. A few minutes later, Darren walked in. He looked different. Same suit, same belt, same hair combed into place, but his confidence had a crack running through it like a windshield hit by a rock. He sat down without being invited. That alone was a sign he was trying to reclaim control. Elise spoke first. "Darren, thank you for joining. We're discussing a matter related to document deletion requests and vendor invoicing." Darren's eyes flicked toward me, then away. "This is about that file? That was a misunderstanding." Priya's voice was calm. "Darren, IT has access logs showing deletion attempts from your account. We also have text messages from you to my employee instructing deletion." Darren's nostrils flared. "You're really doing this? Over an email chain?" Jordan spoke. and his quiet tone made it worse for Darren because it didn't rise to meet his drama. It's not just an email chain. It's an archived record. We restored it from backups. We have the content. We have your access attempts. We have the timeline. Darren's hands clenched on the table. So what? You're just going to take one employee's word over mine? Elise looked at him like he'd just insulted her intelligence. We're not relying on anyone's word. We're relying on records. Mark slid a printed page across the table toward Darren. This is a summary of Cedar Ridge invoices and your approval pattern. Darren didn't touch it. He stared at it like it might bite him. Priya asked, "Can you explain why Cedar Ridge invoices repeatedly fall just under approval thresholds and why several lack supporting documentation?" Darren laughed, high and sharp. That's how consulting works. It's retainer-based. Jordan tapped his keyboard. We also found emails from Cedar Ridge referencing a percentage arrangement. And we found calendar invites labeled Cedar Lunch, scheduled repeatedly. Often the same day invoices were approved. Darren's face went red. So now lunches are illegal? Mark's voice stayed flat. Luncheon isn't illegal. Kickbacks are. The room went still. I could hear the faint buzz of the lights. Somewhere outside the conference room, someone coughed. Darren's eyes snapped to me. You did this. I didn't answer right away. I watched him. I watched how his anger tried to find a place to land, like a wasp trapped in a jar. Priya's gaze hardened. Darren, do not address my employee in that tone. Darren scoffed. He's trying to ruin me. Elise said, Darren, did you send the message instructing deletion? Darren's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Jordan, like Jordan might somehow unlog the logs. Finally, Darren said, I was trying to protect the company. Priya leaned forward. Protect the company from what? Darren hesitated. A fraction too long. Mark asked, from discovery of fraud? Darren pushed back from the table so abruptly his chair legs screeched. This is insane. Elise stayed calm. Darren, you are being placed on immediate administrative leave, effective now. You are not to access any company systems. You will be escorted to collect personal items. Darren's face went pale again. He looked at me, and his eyes were wide with a kind of disbelief that was almost funny if it hadn't been aimed at my life. He leaned toward me and hissed, low enough that the others might not hear. You think you've won? You're nothing. I looked back at him. I kept my voice even, and I said the line that had been forming in my head since the first text arrived. I don't delete evidence. I document it. His expression shifted like he'd been slapped without contact. Jordan stood. Security will escort you. Darren's mouth opened. Then he shut it. He walked out stiffly, shoulders tight, like he was trying to hold his dignity in place with muscle alone. I stayed seated for a moment after he left because my legs didn't feel reliable. The adrenaline that had held me upright for 2 days was draining, leaving me hollow and shaky. Priya looked at me. Are you okay to return to work, or do you need to go home? I swallowed. I can work. Elise nodded. If you feel any retaliation from anyone, you come to me immediately. Jordan added, and for what it's worth, you did exactly what our policies are designed for. Policies. Funny how Darren treated them like suggestions until they turned into handcuffs. Over the next week, the investigation expanded like a stain spreading in water. IT pulled deeper backups. Not just the file Darren wanted gone, but older snapshots, archived emails, approval logs, and access histories. They found that Darren had been using his credentials to access folders he didn't need. They found he'd tried to delete other files, too. Small things, scattered, like he thought he could erase a trail, one footprint at a time. They also found something that made HR's eyes go hard. Darren had been manipulating expense reimbursements. Small amounts at first, $48.20 here, $112.90 there, coded as client meals with Cedar Ridge. Then bigger, a $1,975 conference fee that didn't match any event. A $3,600 team off-site, billed to a vendor code that shouldn't have touched it. And Cedar Ridge? Cedar Ridge's emails were sloppy. Casual. Too comfortable. Like they thought Darren was untouchable. One email from their account manager actually said, "Glad we're keeping this between us." Backups kept it between nobody. On Friday, May 23rd, at 3:30 p.m., there was an all-staff email from the CEO. It didn't include dramatic details. Companies rarely do. It said Darren Holt was no longer with Brightline Freight Solutions, effective immediately, and that the company was strengthening internal controls and vendor oversight. I watched people read it in real time, heads lifting, brows furrowing. Maya turned in her chair and mouthed, "Oh my God." In the hallway, I saw Darren's old office door. It was open, empty. The silver pen still sat on the desk like a relic, but the desk itself looked stripped of personality, like a staged apartment. That afternoon, Priya called me into her office. It smelled like jasmine tea and clean paper. She gestured for me to sit. "I want to talk about what comes next." I sat, hands folded. I noticed a small glass bowl on her desk filled with paper clips shaped like tiny arrows. It was such a weirdly specific detail that it made me feel calmer. Priya said, "First, thank you. Second, we're implementing new policies, tighter access control, mandatory dual approval for vendor invoices over $5,000, automatic flagging for repeated invoices just under thresholds, and quarterly audits with IT involvement." I nodded. "That makes sense." She looked at me. "How has this impacted you personally?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was safer than pretending. "I haven't slept well." Priya's face softened. "I'm sorry. That's the cost of doing the right thing sometimes. But I also want you to know you're valued here." I didn't know what to do with that. Darren had trained me to expect threats, not appreciation. Priya continued, "We're also offering you a merit adjustment and a title change. Vendor compliance analyst. It reflects what you've been doing." My stomach flipped, not with fear this time, with surprise. "Thank you," I said, and my voice cracked slightly. I cleared my throat. "Thank you. Really?" She nodded. "One more thing. We're switching Cedar Ridge to Do Not Engage, status pending review, and we're building an approved vendor list. No more personal relationships driving purchasing decisions." I thought about Darren's smug face when he'd told me I wasn't a hero. About how he'd tried to shove me into being his accomplice. Karma didn't need me to do anything illegal. Karma didn't need me to sabotage him or humiliate him publicly. Karma just needed me to do one simple, lawful thing he couldn't stand: keep records. A few days later, Maya cornered me at the coffee machine. It was 8:55 a.m., and the machine was making that gurgling noise like it was struggling emotionally. She leaned in. "Okay, I'm going to ask, and you can tell me to shut up." I sipped my coffee. "Ask. Did Darren get fired because of you?" The question was direct. Maya wasn't being nosy for entertainment. She looked genuinely worried for me. I kept my voice low. I didn't fire him. He fired himself. I just didn't cover for him. Maya's eyes widened. So he really was doing something? I nodded once. She blew out a breath. I knew he was awful, but I didn't think he was like that. Most people don't, I said. She looked at me for a long second. I'm glad you're okay. So am I admitted. That weekend, I cleaned out my desk drawers. Not because I was leaving, but because the whole ordeal made me crave order. I found a stale pack of gum, a bent paperclip, and the lemon stress ball I'd forgotten about. I squeezed it. It squeaked softly, which startled me, and I laughed, an actual laugh, alone at my desk on a quiet Saturday, when I'd come in to catch up on month end. It was a small, funny moment, the kind that doesn't matter, but it reminded me how much tension had been living in my shoulders. Later that same day, Jordan stopped by to drop off a new badge reader attachment they were installing on finance cabinets. He looked a little less tired. He leaned against my desk. You holding up? I think so, I said. How bad was it? Jordan grimaced. Bad enough that we're rewriting a bunch of procedures. But also, good timing. If he had gotten you to delete the file, it wouldn't have mattered. Backups had it. Email archive had it. But he would have dragged you into it. He was trying to make you complicit. I stared at my monitor, at the neat columns of numbers. That's what scared me. Jordan nodded. People like that don't just want to get away with it. They want company. I thought about the moment Darren leaned in and said he'd bury me. About how small he wanted me to feel. The funniest part, in the dark way, was that the thing he used as a weapon, deletion, was the thing that flagged it in the first place. The audit would have been routine, quiet, but his panic made it loud. He thought deleting would save him, and backups flipped everything. That's what I learned. Not just that systems remember, but that calm is its own kind of power. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten him back. I didn't post anything online or expose him for clicks. I didn't do anything illegal, and I didn't need to. I took screenshots. I saved the file. I followed policy. I told the truth when ET asked, and when the moment came where Darren expected me to flinch, I didn't. Now, months later, my desk is in the same spot by the windows, but the air feels different. Not perfect. Work is still work. The printer still jams. The microwave note is still there. Someone added a new one. Do not microwave fish. It's a war crime. I still have my chipped blue mug. I still have the desk fan. I still have the lemon stress ball. And sometimes I squeeze it just to remind myself that I made it through. Darren's office has someone else in it now. Someone who asks for things in writing. Someone who doesn't treat employees like disposable tools. And every time I approve a vendor invoice, I see the new dual approval workflow, the threshold alerts, the access controls, the audit trail. It isn't just bureaucracy. It's protection. The lesson is simple, and it's the kind that people don't believe until they live it. When someone with power tells me to erase the truth, the safest thing I can do is refuse to play their game. Never delete evidence. Screenshot, report, follow policy. Because the moment someone panics over a backup, it's already over for them.